Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Poetry Thursday. I've got a lovely poem to read for you today that is a last-minute addition to the roster. I had originally gone back to our old frenemy, the FSG Poetry Anthology, that black and white thing. I don't know if I have it within reach. Yes, this thing. I had originally gone back to here to see if I could find something else, a few more poems in here to sort of renovate this volume, since I hit a couple of bad ones, or ones that I didn't like at all. And I had planned on doing that for today. I had one all lined up and ready. And then Aaron Facer did a video in which he read a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson. Nobody appreciates Robert Louis Stevenson more than I do on BookTube. Nobody. So I viewed that as a hurled gauntlet. So I put the FSG Poetry Anthology aside and went back to another old friend, the Oxford Book of English Verse, the Helen Gardner edition. I only have a handful of poetry anthologies, and they are going to make do for these daily poetry readings forever, just to show you how bottomless a really good poetry anthology is. We're going to do with these forever. I knew that even Helen Gardner, who had very much a new broom sweeps clean attitude about the old Oxford Book of English Verse, I knew she would have to include Stevenson, because the thing that a lot of people forget about Stevenson is because they know, his novels and his novellas. They know those books so well. Those books have achieved a well-earned immortality. They are incredibly good. People tend to forget what a great poet he was. Although Penguin Classics has done their best, that they have a volume of his poetry that is very good. But it turns out there is a poem here by Stevenson, so we'll read that. It gives his tragic dates, 1850 to 1894. Very little time. Don't you believe it when you read a thumbnail biography of him and you're told that early death was consumption. Don't you believe it. It was tobacco. But anyway, this is called The House Beautiful. And it starts with a few lines in italics before it shifts out of italics to normal type font and addresses you. And there's a break between the two. So we'll read the first part as a separate thing, a kind of a breath, because the first part is intending to set the tone for the second part. A naked house, a naked moor, a shivering pool before the door, a garden bare of flowers and fruit, and poplars at the garden foot. Such is the place that I live in, bleak without and barren within. So the narrator of the poem is describing his home, which has ugly scenery and no frills whatsoever, dripping pools and no comfort. Then we move on to the bulk of the poem. Yet shall your ragged moor receive the incomparable pomp of the eve, and the cold glories of the dawn behind your shivering trees be drawn. And when the wind from place to place doth the unmoored cloud galleons chase, your garden gloom and gleam again with leaping sun, with glancing rain. Here shall the wizard moon ascend the heavens in the crimson end of day's declining splendor. Here the army of the stars appear. The neighbor hollows dry or wet, spring shall with tender flowers be set. And oft the morning muser see larks rising with the broomy lea. And every fairy wheel and thread of cobweb dew be diamond. When daisies grow, shall winter time silver and simple the grass with rime. Autumnal frosts enchant the pool and make the cart ruts beautiful. And when snow bright the moor expands, how shall your children clap their hands? To make this earth, our hermitage, a cheerful and a changeful page, God's bright and intricate device of days and seasons doth suffice. You see what the poet is doing there? You see what's happening there, the contrast between the two? The first part, just a few lines in italics, is grimly describing how unsatisfying the location is. A garden bare of flowers and fruit, and poplars at the garden foot, such is the place that I live in, bleak without and bare within. And the rest of the poem is designed as a counter note to that. The rest of the poem is chiding the first few lines by saying, look at all that your allegedly bleak and barren surroundings have to offer. Look at all that is happening all around you, and how beautiful it is. How astonishing. This is some of the high-blown rhetoric here. When the wind from place to place doth the unmoored cloud galleons chase. Your garden gloom and gleam again, with leaping sun, with glancing rain. Notice there are all kinds of adjectives you could use for sun and rain, but instead Stevenson is going for the most dramatic and the most active. Here shall the wizard moon ascend the heavens in the crimson end of day's declining splendor. Here, notice he wants an end rhyme, and it's very clever. It's a very adept thing. You're pausing between splendor and here introduces the next line, but it rhymes with appear. Here, the army of the stars appear. Whereas if you didn't have an ear for that, a particularly Scottish ear for that, if you didn't have that ear, that arrangement would never occur to you. You would go hunting for some other end rhyme. But instead, it's extremely, extremely well done. What was it? There was another bit here that I really, really liked. Yes, when the snow bright, the moor expands. How shall your children clap their hands? That sense that fresh fallen snow on a broad expanse of heath or moor or grass or whatever expands it. That's absolutely true, right? You always feel that way. That somehow it's this white page effect is bigger. But leave it to a good poet to say that. And it largely works, right? I think it largely works as a reminder to anyone who might be grousing in the vein of the opening lines in italics about how much splendor is all around them that doesn't require any money or anything like that. This was a common refrain in the poetry of the time, and you might think, therefore, that Stevenson is posturing in the way that many a back-to-nature poet did in his day, but no, he meant it and lived it. He spent many an hour and a day and a week just tramping around outside with barely an apple core to sustain him, and knew whereof he spoke when he talked about these natural beauties. So in this case, it has the ring of conviction. But I wanted to add it as a sort of a postscript. I'll leave a link to Aaron's video down below, because if anybody's going to read Robert Louis Stevenson, he's going to get a response from me, and we will just move on to the much maligned FSG Poetry Anthology tomorrow and see if we can scoop some gold out of it. But anyway, that's your poem for today. That is Robert Louis Stevenson, and the poem is called The House Beautiful. And the title of the poem is referring to the house of nature. It's not referring to the bleak, empty, drafty habitation that is invoked in the first few lines. It's talking about a bigger and broader house, which Stevenson liked to think we all could inhabit. He spent a lot of time indoors as well. He was a very bookish person, but he was at least he had the sincerity of being able to do it, to have it both ways. These back to nature type poems, these merely live free and breathe and be a man again and all that sort of stuff, they're particularly grating when they are written by ink-stained wretches, by poets who never went outside voluntarily except the stretch between their front door and the coffee house. Stevenson isn't like that. So anyway, that is your poem for today. We will move on into trickier waters tomorrow with the FSG Poetry Anthology. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.